You showed stable growth, clinical visitation levels as the general popularity, let's face it, of ketamine continues to grow for depressive disorder. What would you say, I guess, operational speaking, like the big takeaway from this latest results that you announced last week? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic exclusive. Great to have you on. My name is Shad Dales. I'm your host, and today, welcome back a familiar face to the podcast. He's the CEO of Numinus Wellness, which trades under the ticker symbol NUMI on the TSX. Payton Nyquvest. About time we have you back on because we've had a lot of people say, "Where is Payton?" Payton is here. And what a week it was last week. Some pretty important information to obviously communicate to your shareholders. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you've gotten some good feedback so far.
Yeah, the feedback's been great, and obviously super proud of what the company's been able to accomplish here over the last little bit. And as we've talked about for a long time, coming into 2024, which is going to be, I think, quite an exciting year for the space.
I think there's a lot of people that were saying, "Oh, boys, here we go. Is this like another field trip? The burn rate is through the roof." All this stuff that was speculating over the last couple months. I think people are frustrated because of like the industry and how it's performed the last couple months. But you've indicated you want to get to that $1 million burn rate. That was important. You achieved that. So, based
Hmm.
off of that, in your latest results, you showed stable growth, clinical visitation levels as the general popularity, let's face it, of ketamine continues to grow for depressive disorder. What would you say, I guess, operational speaking, like the big takeaway from this latest results that you announced last week?
Yeah, I think both numbers are or both number segments are trending in the direction that we want to see them trending. Burn rate continues to come down, and the other side, revenue and margin continues to improve. And I think we've spoken a lot about the need to do that, and it's something we've acknowledged from very very early goings. I think for a lot of people, there's this kind of expectation. Well, there's just a switch you can flip in order to do that.
Yeah.
But you do need to continue to build a business and continue to make sure that you're not doing anything to cut your nose off to spite your face. And
Ex-
now we've built a clinic network, and the U.S. clinic network in particular. Obviously, the U.S. and Canadian environments are just a little bit different, but
Yeah.
the U.S. environment continues to be really, really, really strong. Canada too, but with US and the reimbursement opportunities we've seen with ketamine, it's really, really been great for us. And then building out this training platform, which we've talked a lot about, which now is fully built and scalable for us, and frankly, at a time where that is what is needed. And we've talked
Yeah.
about this for a long time, but it is the biggest limiting factor and the biggest bottleneck to success of these different treatments.
2024, and I, don't want to sound too over optimistic, but we were in Las Vegas last week at the big cannabis conference. A lot of people, there was the Remind as well, the psychedelic portion, but many believing with an election year, we're going to have a strong economy, which is very, very hopeful. If we
Hmm.
get some sort of like DEA announcement of rescheduling to cannabis, along with MDMA, fully approving MDMA, what that presents for both verticals.
Yeah.
Are you hearing a lot of the same thing? Because I would think even with a rescheduling announced by the DEA, that's going to have a domino effect in the psychedelic space, would it not?
I 100%. And I think, as you kind of mentioned, coupled with, the anticipation around maps next year, you're going into an election year. I think it's going to be an extremely strong environment, particularly, for organizations that have operations in the United States. I think it's going to be a very big year. And I've seen, particularly in the last 30 days, um, you're seeing a lot of inbound interest, much more so than ever before, or at least not ever before, but at least in the last couple of years. And I think there's renewed enthusiasm, and very limited places to be able to put capital to work, to benefit from that, really.
So you're getting more interest, would you say, like institutional talk lately than say, I know back September, October, the sentiment was there's a war
Hmm.
going on, and there's many wars that are showing up, and
Yeah.
it's there was a lot of skepticism going on right now. Do you think that's changed somewhat?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so for sure. I think that obviously still is present, but I think we're sort of through the maybe initial shock of that, and again going into an
That's a good
election year,
point.
and more looking directly at our environment and our industry. A lot of renewed enthusiasm and particularly around infrastructure. I think there's been lots of support in the drug development space, but as we move closer and closer, as you mentioned, significant changes in the cannabis space,
Yeah.
we know that a lot of that is going to be driven by how can you meet the client, and most successful ways of being able to do that. And I think the same is going to be in our space where you've seen obviously the Spravato numbers have continued to be really, really, really
Huge
impressive.
numbers, huh?
Huge,
Wow.
huge numbers, huge numbers. And so for anybody who's watching that, obviously, then you look to things like MDMA and think, that's could be a pretty strong sign of things to come. But again, I think what's been to me really great to see in the space is the educate. Unfortunately, human beings we learn things typically the hard way, and the last couple of years I think has been a pretty hard education on learning about psychedelic therapy and learning
Yep.
about what is going to be the commercialization pathway for psychedelic
Yep.
therapy. The drug development side of things obviously is extremely necessary to get that research done, but this is really going to come down to clinical implementation
Yep.
and clinics being able to wrap a business model around it and understand, one, they need to understand how it's good for their clients, and two, they need to understand how it's good for their business, right?
Yep.
And I think Numinus is very uniquely positioned to be able to demonstrate that.
So, as you said in your latest earnings, you got it down to $1 million burn rate monthly. So, I guess the question then is this sustainable going forward? What's the message that you want to communicate to investors now that you have it down to that? Like, what are the next steps now that you've achieved this number?
Yeah, continue to get it lower.
Right.
It wasn't.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The work isn't done at getting it under a million. The work continues until the company is fully sustainable. And
Yeah.
so we've continued to use a very challenging time just in general to really really focus on the operations of the business, making sure we're prioritizing the things that are extremely successful, and mitigating the risks of things that maybe aren't working as well as some other things are, and to be really really well prepared for 2024.
Learning as you go, right?
Well, learning as you go, but also, we've had such a unique opportunity. Whether it's the work we've been involved with clinical trials and all the
Yeah.
different clinical trials we've done, training, special access. We've done a number of different special access treatments now with psilocybin and now MDMA. We've been able to be a part of and learn arguably more than anybody, what this looks like in the real world,
Yeah.
and be prepared for. I think it's easy to focus on the size of the problem, right? We've talked a lot about, doesn't matter which mental health indication you're talking about, people are continuing to struggle, and those numbers continue to get worse. And while it's you can get caught up in the size of that number, I think what we really have to also demonstrate and focus on in the early going, just maybe talking about MDMA particularly for a minute, is we've got to ensure client outcomes. That has to be the number one priority. Is let's do this really 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 well, and not cut corners, or
Well said.
we saw that with ketamine, right? You saw a lot of hype come into the ketamine space. You saw a lot of good practices, bad practices. You saw then a consolidation, and now you've seen the success coming out of that. I think we just have to be really really focused on those client outcomes and ensuring that, knowing that the size of the problem unfortunately is massive and doesn't seem to be getting any better. And
Mhm.
so let's take what are very promising opportunities to impact that number and make sure that we're ensuring what that looks like. And then
Yeah.
when we go to look at scale, practitioners who are wanting to add this into their practice or into their business, feel that stability in what we're offering to clients.
Let's focus on MDMA more now. And I know there's a lot of people that are interested to know what is going on with MAPS. They had their data released back in September. This was
Mm-hmm.
really compelling data. And I think to a lot of people's surprise, it feels like it's somewhat stalled, where it's like they haven't filed yet. As far as like in September, this still hasn't been filed, nor has the Series A financing by MAPS been closed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in your opinion, where are we at with this right now? Why is it appear, in your opinion, that this is somewhat slowed? Because, like I said, the results that were basically announced back in September were incredible.
I think if anybody, I guess there's a judgment that taking
I
six,
know, right? Here we go.
there's a judgment that taking
Should take
a second phase 3 successful results for MDMA assisted therapy, which is a Schedule 1 drug, and then making an FDA submission a couple of months later. If anybody thinks that that's stalled, um, I they're more than welcome to try and do it quicker. From what I know, MAPS has previously said that they plan on making that submission to the FDA before the end of the year, and um, from what I know, they're not delayed on that. So,
okay.
hopefully, we'll see something soon before the end of the year. And in
So you
terms of
believe the momentum is still building very much forward. Like
absolutely,
there's zero concern.
no, absolutely. I think that momentum continues to build, and Maps, continues to execute from what I see. So, I think that submission, obviously, for anybody who's maybe trying to wrap their head around what that means. So that submission, as I understand it, that submission puts them on sort of a defined 6-month pathway to get comments and review from the FDA because they have breakthrough therapy status. It's usually a defined 6-month window, and then post approval, they then go through a very defined DEA rescheduling process. So about 60 to 90 days where the DEA reschedules the
Yep.
drug. So
Yep.
that should land us kind of early Q3 next year. And for us as an organization, what we're kind of taking from that is, training takes time, setting up a practice takes time, and we can support with both of those initiatives. So, for us, the moment that submission is in, it's really a signal for anybody who's paying attention to what we offer in Numinus. It's really a signal like now is the time, and I think that's
Yep.
what a lot of the medical community and the practitioner community have been waiting for is, when do I spend the time to get trained? When do I start getting my
Yep.
clinic up and
Yep.
running? And Numinus, as I said, can support both of those things. So we're obviously very keenly looking at and excited about when that submission comes in. And I think for people who are wondering, will it get approved or not get approved? You have not really seen any examples of something that the FDA has given breakthrough therapy status for not get approved. And, obviously looking at the results, they're astounding. So nothing's ever a sure thing, but
So to
yeah,
understand, like there's a new drug application that's then filed. Once that's submitted, the timeline then is for whether it's
six
approved or not,
months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from my understanding from the previous podcast that we've done, if the FDA were to approve MDMA, it's MAPS's MDMA protocol that they would legalize, not
Yeah.
MDMA as a whole. Am I understanding that
No,
correctly?
it's MAPS formulation and protocol, and MAPS will be the distributor of the drug.
What do you think a Series A financing announcement would mean for the industry?
I think it would be really nice if they announced a Series A financing closing and the drug submission at the same time. I think that, in my mind, would take any should take any skepticism out of where MDMA is at, and
It wakes things up in a hurry.
for sure. And look, like, they're doing it's a Series A is a private financing.
Yeah.
They don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
But I think Maps probably is aware that there's skepticism out there, and I think Maps has always done things in their mind what's best, not just for Maps, but also what's good for this movement and the space. And I think they're understanding that that's probably
Yeah.
creating some skepticism. So I could potentially see them wanting to alleviate as much skepticism as possible.
Isn't it funny how everybody wanted all this news, and in a lot of ways, probably a lot of companies went public way too soon. We talk about that because on the private side, you think of the advancements that this overall industry has created and what some companies would be positioned in. But
Hmm.
here we are, like you said, 30 days goes by and people start to lose their stuff where it's just like, why is this taking so long? But that's the
Hmm.
nature of the world that we live in right now, right?
It is. It is. People want things quickly, and look, 5 years ago when I founded Numinus, Maps was a nonprofit. Compass was sort of just an idea. None of this existed. And in 5 years, you've seen billions of dollars come into to
Yeah.
create, really create an industry. And it's still, I think it's always important to define that, psychedelic therapy is a subsection of an industry, which is mental health, right?
Yeah.
And so that money's been spent to create that subsection, and we're now at the period of, okay, money's been spent, research has been done, practices have been looked into, tried, assumed. Some things have worked, some things have not worked, and we're now going into 2024 with MDMA most likely getting approved. Ketamine's proven to be, very successful, not just in launch financially, but from a client outcome perspective. I can say from what we see, clients are getting huge benefit, and there's a lot of enthusiasm about what the future holds. So
You seem upbeat. You seem excited.
I am excited. I am
It's
excited.
good.
It's yeah, I am.
One of the big takeaways in your earnings as well was the report where you provided an update from your Numinus certification, pathway program to train and certify psychedelic therapy practitioners. So investors, they basically wanted to see numbers, and now they have it. You have 400 unique learners have participated since inception. So based off of that, are you satisfied with the participation to date?
The launch has been extremely successful, and it's still very, very early. And I think, again, what I'm probably most excited about is the feedback we've gotten from those practitioners. The has been overwhelmingly positive, and I think, especially at a time where, you know, it is time to find a path of certification, very, very quickly for psychedelic therapists. So I'm very encouraged by the amount of participants in how early this has been launched in a very challenging environment.
Yeah,
And as we look towards the future now, that's a platform, as I mentioned, that's now fully built out, scalable, costs us very,
yeah.
very little to run, and has really, really healthy margins with it. And most importantly, trains people and gives them the training that they need so that this movement can continue to thrive and scale.
I think 2024, like I said, it just blows my mind away that these politicians have to wait every 4 years to actually start making decisions, right when the
Uh,
election's about to happen. However, I think it's the perfect opportunity for a lot of these verticals right now, especially as we get closer. There's got to be some major decisions that are being made. But
yep.
the most important thing regarding this space is that the data doesn't lie. And based off of that, I think it's, a very lucrative opportunity for us. A lot of these, new emerging industries to have their day in the sun, so to speak, as we inch closer towards next year's election, because a lot of
Mhm.
talk going on right now. We're going to see some rescheduling, some approvals. And with that, it's going to create a huge domino effect, I think, for a lot of companies within the industries.
Yep. Agreed. Totally agree.
Outside of that, listen, I want to send my condolences to you and your family. I know that your father had passed away. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
My
Yeah.
apologies. I lost my father 8 years ago, so I can relate to how you're feeling, buddy. But what was his name?
Shane.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
best
yeah.
remember about your dad?
It's funny. His service is actually tomorrow, and I've been kind of reflecting on what to say. And
Yeah.
my dad loved people,
Did he?
and my dad treated everybody the same. Didn't matter what you had, who you were, where you came from, and reflecting back, that stands out to me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a clip from Jordan Peterson right after my father passed away. I don't know if you have any brothers or not, but I said a
Mm,
eulogy. My brother was, too afraid to get up in front of the group. But I thought this is a great way of remembering your dad's legacy and
mm,
also your legacy for like the family name moving forward. And it was be the bravest. If you're a son, be the bravest at your father's funeral. And I think that speaks
mm,
to the character of person that I think
mm,
your dad would always wanna be and be proud of, and at the
mm,
same time too, I think it's a legacy that you can think about what that last name means to you in the past and what it does moving
mm,
forward, but that always just resonated with me and still does to this day. So, if I can
mm,
give any words of wisdom or advice or suggestions, regardless of how tough it is, just be there for the family and, be the bravest person at your father's funeral because it's something you'll never forget,
mm. That rings true. Thank you.
doesn't it?
Really appreciate it. Yeah, man.
Well, listen, I appreciate the time, and I know it's been obviously some challenging times. You've got a lot going on, but great report. I think a lot of people it was a great update. They like to see like the momentum that's going to continue to grow, and let's see where this goes into the new year, and see what kind of developing news is going to create for the overall industry where you benefit from that. But
Yeah.
appreciate you checking in.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Peyton.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. We appreciate all your feedback. So, if you want to leave some comments, let us know what you think and what you want to learn of. Subscribe to our channel by clicking here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click here, because at the end of the day, we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.